My wife cheated on me, but what hurt almost as much was my own mother's reaction. Instead of standing by my side, she defended my wife and kept telling me it was just one mistake, that I shouldn't throw my family away over it. I couldn't accept that, so I walked away from both of them. Now, 8 months later, my mom is lying in a hospital bed asking me to come see her because she wants to make things right before it's too late. I'm honestly not sure if I should even care. So here's the whole story. I'm a 35-year-old civil engineer, and for the last 10 years I've been working my way up at a mid-sized engineering firm designing commercial buildings and infrastructure projects. It's not the kind of career people get excited to hear about at dinner parties, but it pays well, keeps me busy, and has given me a comfortable life. My grandfather left me an inheritance when he passed away, and I used it to pay off my mortgage early, so I own my house outright. I have no debt, a healthy retirement account, and overall my life was pretty stable. My wife, Rachel, is 33 and worked as an office manager at a dental practice. We had been together for 9 years and married for 7. We met through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue, dated for 2 years, and eventually got engaged. There was nothing dramatic about our relationship. We were just two people who enjoyed each other's company and decided to build a future together. The first few years of marriage were genuinely good. We bought our house, renovated it one room at a time, hosted family dinners, and took simple vacations to places like Branson and Pigeon Forge. Rachel wanted children someday, but we both agreed to wait until we felt more financially secure. Looking back now, I realize we never looked at money the same way. I was always focused on saving for the future, while she seemed more interested in spending. We spent plenty of weekends wandering through Home Depot picking out paint colors, flooring, and tile. I'd come home from work to find she'd rearranged the living room again because she'd seen another decorating trend online. When we remodeled the kitchen, it took 3 months because I handled almost all of the installation work myself on weekends while Rachel picked out decorative hardware that cost twice as much as the practical options. At the time, I thought our disagreements about money were normal. I'd suggest putting extra cash into retirement savings, and she'd rather remodel the guest bathroom that nobody even used. I'd plan a reasonably priced vacation, and she'd fall in love with a luxury resort that cost 3 times my budget. We usually compromised, which really meant I gave in and spent more than I wanted just to avoid another argument. My mother, Linda, absolutely adored Rachel from the moment they met. She treated her like the daughter she'd always wanted, taking her shopping, inviting her to lunch, and spending hours talking with her on the phone about recipes, decorating ideas, and whatever else they could think of. At first, I actually liked how close they became because it kept my mom from constantly hovering over me. She had always been incredibly opinionated about every decision I made. When I was in college, she'd call twice a week to make sure I was eating properly and attending class. When I bought my first car, she gave me a lecture about maintenance schedules that lasted nearly an hour. Even after I earned my engineering degree, she insisted I should have gone into medicine instead. Having Rachel around seemed to redirect all that attention, and I thought that was a blessing. Eventually, though, I started noticing a pattern. Whenever Rachel and I disagreed about anything, Mom automatically sided with her. If Rachel complained that I worked too many late nights, Mom would call and tell me I needed to get my priorities straight. If we argued about money, Mom would accuse me of being controlling. Before long, it always felt like I was outnumbered. I mostly ignored it because I convinced myself that's just how families are sometimes. My younger brother Derek, who's 30, lives about 2 hours away with his wife and their 2 kids. We were never especially close because he was always the golden child growing up, the one who could seemingly do no wrong in Mom's eyes. Even so, we got along well enough during family gatherings and kept things friendly. Then everything fell apart on an ordinary Tuesday evening in March. I'd stayed late at work finishing calculations for an important project deadline and finally got home around 8 o'clock. I expected to find Rachel on the couch watching one of her reality shows, but the house was dark except for the light coming from our bedroom. I assumed she'd gone to bed early. I opened the bedroom door and froze. Rachel was in our bed with a man I'd never seen before. They both scrambled to pull the sheets over themselves, and the look on Rachel's face said everything before either of them spoke. It was pure panic mixed with guilt. For a moment, it didn't even feel real. It was like I was standing outside my own life watching someone else's nightmare unfold. My mind started noticing the smallest details instead of processing the bigger picture. I saw the expensive watch sitting on my nightstand, Rachel's clothes scattered across the floor I'd vacuumed just a few days earlier, the unfamiliar smell of another man's cologne filling the room, and the sheets we'd picked out together at Target only 6 months before now wrapped around someone who had no business being in my home. The guy started mumbling something as he pulled the sheet up to his chest, as if modesty suddenly mattered. Rachel just sat there frozen, her mouth open but no words coming out. For about 5 seconds, nobody moved. It felt like time had completely stopped, like someone had paused the worst scene imaginable. Then Rachel finally spoke. "This isn't what it looks like." I actually laughed because I couldn't believe she'd say something so ridiculous. "Really? It looks like my wife is in bed with another man in my house in my bed. What else is it supposed to look like?" The guy introduced himself as Kyle, a pharmaceutical sales rep who had been visiting the dental office where Rachel worked for the last 6 months. He hurried to get dressed, clearly panicking. He looked like the kind of smooth-talking guy who always knew exactly what to say, drove an expensive car, wore a flashy watch, and probably had the same routine he used on every woman looking for excitement outside a stable marriage. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he started to say. "Get out of my house." I cut him off. He didn't argue. He grabbed his shoes, rushed out of the bedroom, and less than half a minute later I heard the front door slam. Seconds after that, his car tore out of my driveway so fast it left tire marks on the concrete I'd pressure washed only a few weeks earlier. Rachel was crying by then, clutching the sheet tightly around herself. "Please, let me explain." I didn't scream, throw anything, or lose control like people do in movies. I just stood there for a few moments, letting the reality settle in, while she desperately searched for words that could somehow erase what I'd just seen. There weren't any. I turned around, walked into my home office, picked up my laptop and work bag, unplugged my phone charger from the kitchen, grabbed my truck keys from the hook by the door, and walked out. I could hear Rachel calling my name as she hurried down the hallway behind me, but I never stopped. By the time I reached my truck, she had thrown on the bathrobe I'd given her for Christmas and followed me outside barefoot. "Where are you going? We need to talk about this." I climbed into my truck and started the engine. She ran toward me, crying harder. "Please don't leave like this. Just let me explain." I backed out of the driveway while she stood there in tears, still wearing the robe I'd bought for her, and drove away without looking back. My hand stayed steady on the steering wheel even though it felt like my entire life had collapsed in a matter of minutes. I drove straight to my friend James' house. He and his wife, Amy, welcomed me in without hesitation. James only asked one question. "You okay, man?" I told him what had happened, and he simply nodded before handing me the key to their guest room. We'd been friends since college and had worked together at my first engineering job before he moved to another company. He was the kind of friend who would help you move on a weekend without complaining or show up with a toolbox the moment you mentioned a home project. Amy was just as supportive. She brought me fresh towels and told me I could stay as long as I needed. That night, I lay awake in their guest room staring at the ceiling while my phone buzzed nonstop. Rachel kept texting every few minutes. At first, the messages were full of apologies. She begged me to come home, said she was sorry, insisted it had been a terrible mistake, claimed Kyle meant nothing to her, and repeated that I was the only man she loved. She pleaded with me to answer because she couldn't lose me. I read every message but never replied. There was nothing left to say. She had already made her decision the moment she brought another man into our home and into our bed. Around midnight, her tone changed. She started sending long messages explaining how our marriage had been struggling, how she'd felt lonely because I worked too much, and how Kyle had simply been there when she was vulnerable. It was classic blame shifting. Somehow, according to her, my working hard to provide for us had become the reason she cheated. The next morning, I woke up to 17 more text messages and 9 missed calls. Her apologies had turned into anger. One message read, "The least you could do is answer me. I'm your wife. You can't ignore me forever." Actually, I could, and I did. Instead of wasting energy arguing with her, I focused on what I could control. That night, sitting in James' guest room, I grabbed a notebook and started making a practical list. I wasn't writing down my feelings. I was listing assets, bank accounts, timelines, and the next steps I needed to take. That's how my mind works. When everything falls apart, I focus on solving the problems I still can. The house had been purchased before we got married using my inheritance, so it should remain mine. My truck belonged to me before the marriage. Rachel's sedan was jointly owned. Most of my retirement savings had been built before we met, with only some growth during the marriage. We had around $30,000 in joint savings that would likely need to be divided. Even my wedding ring went onto the list because, in my mind, she was the one who had broken the marriage, not me. Before I finally closed the notebook, I'd filled 3 full pages with calculations, financial details, and a clear plan for moving forward. Around 2 in the morning, James found me sitting at his kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets, legal pad notes, and pages of financial information. He looked at the mess and said, "You know, a lawyer can handle most of this, right?" I nodded. "I know, but I need to understand every detail before I walk into that office. You can't protect what you don't know you have." He grabbed a couple of drinks from the fridge, sat across from me, and asked if I wanted to talk about how I was feeling. "Not particularly," I answered. He shrugged and smiled. "Fair enough. Want some help organizing all this instead?" That was exactly what I needed. James had gone through a brutal breakup years earlier, so he understood the importance of keeping everything organized. For the next hour, we sorted through bank accounts, property, retirement savings, and anything else that could matter. By 3 in the morning, I had a clear picture of what belonged to me, what was jointly owned, and what I was willing to walk away from. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer recommended by a coworker. Her name was Patricia, and she got straight to the point. She wasn't interested in offering sympathy or emotional advice, which honestly suited me just fine. During our first meeting, she asked, "Do you want to try to save the marriage?" I didn't hesitate. "No. I want a clean divorce, a fair division of the marital assets, and I want this finished as quickly as possible." She nodded. "That makes my job much easier. Let's go over what you own." We reviewed everything together. Since I had bought the house before we were married using my inheritance, it wasn't considered marital property. Most of my retirement savings had also been built before the marriage, with only some growth during those years together. Our only shared assets were about $30,000 in a joint savings account and Rachel's car, which we'd purchased together 3 years earlier. Patricia explained it in simple terms. The savings would be split equally, and the ownership of the car would depend on whose names were on the title. Everything else I had brought into the marriage stayed with me. Since both of our names were listed on the car, we'd have to deal with that separately. I could live with splitting one car and $15,000 from savings. It felt like a small price to pay to close that chapter of my life for good. I stayed at James' house for the next 3 days and ignored every text message and phone call Rachel sent. She cycled through every possible emotion. She apologized, made excuses, got angry, begged for another chance, and then apologized all over again. I read every message but never replied. On the 4th day, my mom called. "Sweetheart," Rachel told me everything. "You need to come home and work this out." I answered calmly, "That's not happening, Mom." She immediately pushed back. "Don't be so dramatic. Every marriage has rough patches. You can't throw away 7 years over one mistake." That word hit me like a brick. Mistake. As if she'd accidentally picked up the wrong carton of milk instead of choosing to bring another man into our bed. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "Mistakes happen by accident. This was a choice." Mom kept going. "She's devastated. She made a terrible decision, but she loves you. You need to forgive her and move on." I kept my voice steady. "I'm filing for divorce. I'll arrange to collect the rest of my things from the house." She sighed in frustration. "You're making a huge mistake. Marriage takes forgiveness. Your father and I had problems too, but we worked through them." I answered before I could stop myself. "Dad cheated on you." The line went silent for a moment. Finally she said, "No, but we had our own issues. You're being stubborn and prideful. Rachel deserves another chance." I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. She had 7 years of chances not to cheat on me. She chose not to take them. With that, I ended the call. She rang back for more times, but I ignored every attempt. 2 days later, James and I drove back to the house while Rachel was at work. I'd already confirmed her schedule because I wanted to avoid another confrontation. I packed my clothes, my tools, personal belongings, and my grandfather's antique clock from the mantel. Everything else stayed behind. Took about 3 hours to load both trucks. Just as we were finishing, Rachel pulled into the driveway. She rushed inside with red, swollen eyes and immediately started crying. "Please, can we just talk?" I looked at her without any emotion. "There's nothing left to talk about. My lawyer will contact you," she kept pleading. "I made a horrible mistake. It meant nothing. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Before she could get any closer, James stepped between us. He said he's done. Let him get his things and leave. Rachel turned toward him in frustration. "This is between us. You don't understand what we have." From behind James, I quietly corrected her. What we had. Then I carried the last box to my truck, climbed behind the wheel, and drove away without looking back. I thought that would finally be the end of it, but that was really when the nightmare began. Mom launched a full campaign to save my marriage whether I wanted it or not. She called every day, leaving long voicemails about forgiveness, family values, and how cruel I was being. When I stopped answering, she actually started showing up at my office. Thankfully, my boss understood the situation, and after the second visit, security escorted her out of the building. When that didn't work, she recruited my younger brother Derek. He called one Saturday morning and said, "Come on, man, cut Mom some slack. She's just worried about you." I answered, "She's not worried about me. She's worried about Rachel." Derek replied, "Same thing. Rachel's family too." I shook my head. "Not anymore, she isn't." He tried one more time. "People make mistakes. Are you really going to throw everything away over this?" There it was again. That same word that everyone seemed so determined to hide behind. Mistake. I asked Derek one simple question. "Let me ask you this. If Sarah cheated on you, would you take her back?" There was a long silence before he finally answered. "That's different." I asked him how it was different. "Sarah would never do something like that." I couldn't help shaking my head. Neither would Rachel, or at least that's what I believed until she did. I told him I was done with the conversation and hung up. He called back, but I ignored it. A few minutes later, he sent me a text saying I was being selfish and that I needed to think about how my decision was affecting the family. I blocked his number. While all of that was happening, the divorce moved forward. Patricia handled everything exactly the way I hoped she would. Rachel's lawyer argued that she deserved a larger share because she'd contributed to the household during the marriage, but Patricia came prepared with years of financial records showing I'd paid roughly 70% of all our expenses. That argument didn't get very far. Rachel only pushed back on one issue. She wanted to keep living in the house because she said she couldn't afford to move immediately and needed more time. I told Patricia there was no chance of that happening. Rachel could stay with her parents, move in with Kyle, or figure something else out, but she wasn't staying in my house. Patricia smiled and said, "That's exactly what I expected you'd say. I'll file for immediate possession." The judge agreed with us. Since I'd bought the house before we got married using my inheritance, it legally belonged to me. Rachel had no claim to it and was given 30 days to move out. Instead of accepting reality, my mom doubled down. She mailed me a 5-page letter talking about family loyalty, forgiveness, and how I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Then she showed up at the church I'd recently started attending with James and his family, even though I hadn't gone to church in years before that. She caused such a scene in the parking lot that the pastor eventually had to step in and politely ask her to leave. As if that wasn't enough, she contacted my boss to tell him I was going through a difficult time and needed support. My boss called me into his office looking uncomfortable. "Your mother reached out to me," he said. I apologized immediately and promised it wouldn't happen again. He assured me he wasn't worried about my work and reminded me I was one of his best engineers. He simply wanted me to know she'd contacted him. That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. That night, I called my mom for the first time in weeks. "You contacted my boss. Have you completely lost your mind?" She insisted she was only trying to make me see reason and said I was destroying my own life. I told her she had it backward. Rachel destroyed my marriage the day she chose to sleep with someone else. I'm just dealing with the consequences. And if you ever contact my employer again, I'll file for a restraining order. Do you understand me? She sounded shocked. You wouldn't dare. I answered with 2 words. Try me. Then I hung up and blocked her number 2. For months later, the divorce was finalized. Rachel walked away with half of our savings, her car, and whatever personal belongings she'd already taken from the house. I kept my house, my truck, my retirement accounts, and, most importantly, my peace of mind. Not long afterward, I heard through mutual friends that Rachel had actually been seeing Kyle for 6 months before I caught them together. 6 months of lies while I worked late believing I was building a future for us. Strangely, hearing that didn't make me angrier. It mostly made me feel relieved because it confirmed I'd made the right decision. I hadn't lost a good marriage. I'd escaped a dishonest one before wasting even more years. My mom still refused to let it go. She kept sending messages through Derek, relatives, mutual friends, and even people from church. Every message sounded the same. I was letting pride destroy my family. I was refusing to forgive. I'd regret my decision someday. Eventually, I changed my phone number, started attending a different church, and made it clear to everyone that if they kept acting as messengers for my mom or Rachel, I would cut contact with them too. Most people respected that boundary. The few who didn't quickly found themselves out of my life. Through it all, James and his wife Amy never once questioned my decisions or tried to convince me to reconcile. They simply gave me the space to heal. James helped me repaint the bedroom because I couldn't stand looking at the walls where so many memories had been made. Amy helped me shop for new furniture to replace the things Rachel had taken. As we finished putting together my new bed frame, she smiled and said, "You're rebuilding. That's healthy." She was right. I buried myself in work, volunteered for extra projects, stayed late when needed, and focused on designing instead of dwelling on the past. After successfully leading a major commercial complex project, I was promoted to senior engineer. The raise was significant, enough that I could fully fund my retirement accounts and still have money left over. I also started going to the gym with James. I lost 15 pounds, gained muscle, and felt healthier than I had in years. It turns out that when you're no longer spending every evening watching reality television you never cared about, you suddenly have time to improve yourself. I joined a recreational softball league, met a great group of people who knew nothing about my divorce, and enjoyed something refreshingly normal. We'd play a game, grab dinner afterward, and talk about anything except personal drama. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I finally went on my first date. I met Sarah through that softball league. She played on the women's team that practiced right after hours, and for the first time in a long while, meeting someone new actually felt easy. Sarah was an engineer too, just at a different company. After one of our softball practices, we grabbed coffee together. We talked about work, sports, and all the ordinary things people talk about when they're getting to know each other. There was no pressure to dive into anything serious, and honestly, that was exactly what I needed. On our third date, though, I felt she deserved to know the truth. "I got divorced earlier this year," I told her. "My wife cheated on me. The divorce has been finalized for a few months now, but I wanted to be upfront about it." She nodded without looking uncomfortable. "I appreciate the honesty," she said. "I got divorced 2 years ago. Different situation, but I understand." Then she asked, "Are you over it?" I thought about it for a second before answering. "I'm getting there. Some days are better than others." She smiled. "That's fair." We took things one step at a time. Sarah had her own home, her own successful career, and her own independent life. She wasn't looking for someone to rescue her or solve her problems. She simply wanted someone good to spend time with, and after everything I'd been through, that felt incredibly refreshing. Of course, it didn't take long for my mom to hear about Sarah. Derek's wife spotted us having dinner at a restaurant and, as expected, the news made its way through the family. Soon messages started coming through Michelle's Facebook account. Your mom really wants to talk to you. She misses you. Family is forever. She's not doing well. I ignored every single one. Then, about 8 months after I'd cut both Rachel and Mom out of my life, James knocked on my front door one Wednesday evening. Derek called. He said, "Your mom's in the hospital." My stomach dropped instantly. What happened? Heart attack. She's stable, but it was serious. Derek thought you should know. I sat down on the couch, trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to feel nothing after everything she'd done. She had chosen Rachel over her own son, defended the person who betrayed me, and spent months trying to manipulate me into taking back my cheating wife. Why should I care? But another part of me couldn't ignore the fact that she was still my mother. She was the woman who taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, celebrated every achievement, and stood beside me through every scrape and broken bone growing up. Did Derek say anything else? I asked. James hesitated before answering. Just that she's asking for you. She wants to talk before. He paused. He didn't say it outright, but it sounds like the doctors are worried. They're running more tests to see how much damage the heart attack caused. I looked down at my hands. She chose Rachel over me. She told me I was wrong for refusing to forgive a woman who cheated on me. She harassed me at work and tried to get everyone around me to pressure me into taking Rachel back. James nodded. I know. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just passing along the message. I asked how serious it really was. They're talking about bypass surgery. She's waiting for an opening, but the doctors are worried she could have another heart attack before then. That night I barely slept. My mind kept bouncing between good memories and painful ones. I remembered Mom teaching me how to make her spaghetti sauce, crying with pride at my college graduation, telling me Rachel was the perfect woman for me when we first started dating. Then I remembered her telling me I was destroying my family because I refused to forgive someone who had betrayed me. The next morning I called Michelle. How bad is it really? I asked. She spoke quietly. The doctors think she has a good chance if the surgery goes well, but the heart attack was severe. She'll need major lifestyle changes, and they're watching her very closely. Derek said she wants to talk to me. She does, Michelle replied. She's been asking about you ever since she woke up. She says she wants to mend bridges before it's too late. That phrase stuck with me. Mend bridges. As if our relationship had simply drifted apart instead of being torn apart by months of choices she had made herself. I'll think about it, I said. Michelle answered gently. She's still your mother. No matter what happened, she loves you. I couldn't help replying. She had a strange way of showing it. After hanging up, I called Patricia. Somewhere along the divorce process, she'd become more than just my lawyer. She was someone whose judgment I trusted. I need an honest opinion, I told her. My mom had a heart attack. She wants to make things right before surgery. After everything she's done, do I owe her a visit? Patricia was quiet for a moment before answering. Legally? No. You don't owe anyone your time. Morally, that's not something I can decide for you. But I'll tell you what I tell every client dealing with family conflict. Whatever you choose, you're the one who has to live with it. Can you live with never seeing her again if something happens? And can you live with seeing her if it means risking being pulled back into the same cycle of manipulation? Only you know which choice you'll regret less. I thought about those words all weekend. In the end, I drove to the hospital without telling anyone. I simply walked in during visiting hours and asked for Linda's room. When I stepped inside, she looked so much smaller than I remembered. The strong, stubborn woman who had argued with me for months was gone, replaced by someone fragile, lying in a hospital bed surrounded by machines. The moment she saw me, her face lit up. You came, she whispered. I pulled up a chair but left some space between us. Michelle said you wanted to talk. She took a slow, shaky breath. I've had a lot of time to think lying here, about what's really important. I'm sorry for how I handled everything with Rachel. I didn't interrupt her. Years of engineering had taught me that before you can solve a problem, you have to hear the whole explanation. So I sat quietly and let her continue. She took a slow breath before speaking again. I honestly believed that if I could just get the two of you to reconcile, everything would go back to normal. I couldn't stand the thought of our family falling apart. I looked at her and asked quietly, "So you took her side and made me out to be the bad guy just because I had boundaries?" She shook her head. "I wasn't trying to make you the bad guy. I just—" Her voice faded as she closed her eyes for a moment. "I thought if I kept pushing, eventually you'd forgive her and we could all move on. I couldn't understand why you wouldn't work through it." I finally said what I'd been carrying around for months. "Because she betrayed me, Mom. She lied to me every single day for 6 months while she was sleeping with someone else. That's not something you simply work through. That's something you walk away from." Tears started running down her face. "I see that now. I really do. I made everything worse. When you needed support the most, I pushed you away. I chose the wrong person." I stayed quiet for a while. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, to let her live with the consequences of her choices the same way I'd been forced to live with Rachel's betrayal. But another part of me could see something I'd never seen before. She genuinely looked sorry. After a long silence, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me for months. "Why? Why did you fight so hard for her instead of me?" She wiped her eyes with a tissue before answering. "Because I loved Rachel like she was my own daughter." She called me crying, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and that you wouldn't forgive her. I thought I could fix it. I wanted my family to stay together. I was so focused on what I thought I was losing that I never stopped to think about what you had already lost. I looked at her and said, "You weren't losing anything. I was." She nodded slowly. "I know that now. Lying here wondering if I might not get another chance has forced me to see things differently. I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed during the hardest time of your life. I'm sorry I put my own feelings ahead of yours. I'm sorry I spent months trying to manipulate you instead of standing beside you." Her apology sounded sincere, but I'd been hurt enough to know that words alone don't fix broken trust. I decided to change the subject. "Where's Rachel now?" Mom shrugged. "I honestly don't know. I haven't spoken to her in months." That surprised me. "What happened?" She sighed. "After the divorce, I kept expecting her to stay in touch, but she slowly disappeared. She stopped answering my calls. Derek saw her once at a grocery store. As far as I know, she's still with that man. She never even asked how you were doing." I nodded. "Good. I hope they're very happy together." Mom studied my face for a moment. "You really mean that, don't you? You're completely over her." I smiled slightly. "I've been over her for a while now. My life's moved on. I got promoted at work, made new friends, and I'm seeing someone who actually treats me with respect. Honestly, the divorce turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me." She looked genuinely happy to hear that. "Derek mentioned you're dating someone." "Her name's Sarah. She's an engineer too. We have a lot in common." "Is it serious?" she asked. "It's going well. We're taking things slowly." She nodded. "I'd like to meet her someday, if you'll let me. If you can forgive me enough to let me back into your life." That was the question I'd been wrestling with ever since James told me she'd been hospitalized. Could I really let her back in? Should I? I answered honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet. You hurt me more than you probably realize. It wasn't just that you took Rachel's side. It was everything that came after. You showed up at my job, contacted my boss, and spent months trying to pressure everyone around me into convincing me to take back my cheating wife. You made one of the worst periods of my life even harder." She nodded without arguing. "I know. I'm so sorry." I looked her in the eye. "Right now, sorry isn't enough. I need proof that you've actually changed. I need to know you truly understand why what you did was wrong." She answered immediately. "I do understand. I promise I do." I leaned forward in my chair. "Then here are my conditions if you want any relationship with me going forward. First, I need you to admit that divorcing Rachel was the right decision. Not just apologize for your behavior, but actually acknowledge that I made the right choice." She hesitated only for a second before saying, "You did make the right choice. She betrayed you, and you deserved better." I nodded. "Second, Sarah is part of my life now. You'll treat her with respect. No comparisons to Rachel. No comments about moving too fast. No interfering." She agreed immediately. I promise. Third, Derek is no longer your messenger. If you want to talk to me, you contact me yourself. No more sending relatives or friends to guilt me. She nodded again. Agreed. I took a deep breath before giving her the last condition. And finally, this one isn't negotiable. If you ever try to manipulate me or the people in my life again, we're done for good. There won't be another chance. I'll walk away and I won't come back. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she simply nodded. I understand. I won't let you down again. I answered honestly. We'll see. I stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about her doctors, the upcoming surgery, and her recovery plan. The conversation felt awkward, but at least it was calm. When visiting hours ended, I stood up to leave. She looked at me and quietly asked, "Will you come back?" I paused before answering. Maybe. Let's see how the surgery goes, and we'll take it one step at a time. I walked out of the hospital feeling strangely conflicted, carrying emotions I still hadn't completely figured out. I didn't leave the hospital feeling good exactly, but I definitely didn't feel as heavy as I had when I walked in. Mom's apology sounded sincere, but I'd been disappointed before, so I knew her words alone weren't enough. If she really wanted another chance, her actions would have to prove it. On the drive home, I called James and told him I'd gone to see her. She apologized, I said, and honestly, I think she meant it. He asked how I felt about it. Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe her. The other part keeps remembering everything she put me through and wonders if this is just another way to manipulate me. James gave the same practical advice he always did. Give it time. Watch what she does, not what she says. People can change, but they have to earn your trust. I agreed. Yeah, that's the plan. The next few weeks felt strange. Mom successfully made it through bypass surgery. I sent flowers to her hospital room but didn't visit. I still wasn't ready for that. She texted me to thank me, but her messages were short, respectful, and completely free of guilt or pressure. That alone felt like progress. A few days later, Derek called with an update on her recovery. For the first time in months, we actually had a normal conversation without him lecturing me about family obligations. She's doing better, he said. The doctors want her to slow down and make some lifestyle changes. She's been asking about you. I told him I wasn't ready for regular visits yet. She understands, he replied. Then he paused before adding, actually, she told me not to be the messenger anymore. She said she'll text you herself whenever she's ready. I smiled a little. Good. Then Derek surprised me again. Look, I'm sorry for how I acted during your divorce. Mom convinced me you were being unreasonable and I went along with it. I should have had your back instead of piling on. I honestly didn't expect that. Thanks for saying that, I told him. He changed the subject and mentioned he'd heard good things about Sarah. Maybe sometime the four of us can grab dinner. You, Sarah, Michelle, and me. I wasn't ready to jump into that, but I didn't shut the idea down either. Maybe eventually. Let's just take things one step at a time. He agreed. About a month after Mom's surgery, she invited me over for Sunday dinner. Just me, not Sarah. She said she didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or rushed. I accepted because I wanted to see whether this new attitude was real or simply the result of a health scare. When I walked in, she looked different. She'd lost weight, moved more carefully, and looked tired. But she smiled the moment she saw me and gave me a gentle hug, careful not to put pressure on her healing chest. Thank you for coming, she said. Dinner started off awkward because we'd spent so many months barely speaking. The conversation felt forced at first, but little by little it became easier. She asked about my work, the projects I was leading, and how things were going with Sarah. She didn't pry, criticize, or offer unwanted opinions. She simply listened. When I mentioned Sarah, she smiled and said, "She sounds wonderful. I'd love to meet her someday when you're ready." I told her I'd think about it. Toward the end of dinner, she set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "I've started seeing a counselor who specializes in family relationships," she said. "She's helped me realize that I wasn't just wrong about how I handled things. I misunderstood the entire situation. You were the one who was hurt, and somehow I treated you like you were the problem. I didn't really know what to say. She continued, I'm trying to become a better person. Not just for you, but for myself. I need to learn how to respect boundaries and stop trying to control the people I love. I nodded. I'm glad you're getting help. She looked at me with genuine regret. I know I can't undo what I did, but I hope one day you'll let me be part of your life again. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. Maybe we can just build something healthier. I thought about it before answering. Maybe we can, but it's going to take time. She smiled softly. I'll wait as long as it takes. Over the next 3 months, I started noticing that she really had changed. She'd send the occasional text, but never expected an immediate reply. She mailed birthday cards without filling them with guilt or emotional pressure. When I told her I wasn't ready for family gatherings yet, she respected that without arguing. For months after her surgery, Sarah and I finally accepted an invitation to dinner at Mom's house. I was nervous the entire drive there, ready to shut things down if the conversation turned uncomfortable. Instead, Mom welcomed Sarah warmly. She asked about her engineering career, her family, and her hobbies. She never mentioned Rachel, never compared the two of them, and never crossed a line. She was simply interested in getting to know the woman who made me happy. After dinner, while Sarah stepped away to use the restroom, Mom quietly pulled me aside. She's wonderful, she said. I can see why you're happy. Then she added something I never expected to hear. I'm proud of you for knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. I should have told you that from the very beginning. Hearing those words lifted a weight I'd been carrying ever since she'd chosen Rachel over me. 6 months after that hospital visit, all of us sat down for dinner together. Me, Sarah, Mom, Derek, and Michelle. It was the first time the family had been together since before my divorce, and surprisingly, everything felt normal. Nobody mentioned Rachel. Nobody reopened old wounds. We simply shared a meal, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company. While we were washing dishes afterward, Sarah leaned over and whispered, Your family seems really great. I smiled and answered, They're getting there. We're still rebuilding, but we're in a much better place than we used to be. That's where things stand today. Mom and I talk regularly, although a part of me still keeps its guard up. Trust doesn't magically return once it's been broken, and maybe it never fully will. But little by little, we're building a healthier relationship based on respect, honesty, and boundaries, and for now, that's enough. Derek and I are brothers again. We're probably not as close as we could have been if he'd stood by me from the beginning, but we've found our way back to a good place. We grab dinner every now and then, text each other about sports, and things feel normal again. Sarah and I have also been talking about taking the next step and moving in together, but we're not rushing it. We've both been through enough to know there's no reason to hurry. We're making sure we're both completely ready before we do it. She's met all of my friends, I've met her family, and everything about our relationship feels steady and genuine in a way my marriage to Rachel never really did. About 7 months after the divorce, I saw Rachel one last time. She was having dinner with Kyle at a nice restaurant, but despite the expensive place, neither of them looked happy. She noticed me walking in with Sarah, and I watched her expression change from surprise to regret before she quickly tried to pretend she didn't care. I simply gave her a polite nod and kept walking. Whatever problems she was dealing with were no longer mine to solve. Every now and then I see people online saying I should have kept my mother out of my life forever. They think her apology in the hospital was nothing more than emotional manipulation and that eventually she'd fall back into the same old behavior. Maybe they're right. Maybe one day she'll disappoint me again. I honestly don't know. But I do know this. Holding on to anger and cutting someone out of your life forever can feel completely justified in the moment, but carrying that weight year after year is exhausting. It wasn't that I missed the arguments, the guilt trips, or the constant interference. I simply missed having a mother. Seeing her lying in that hospital bed made me realize that people are flawed, and sometimes it takes something life-changing before they truly understand the damage they've caused. Could she slip back into old habits? Absolutely. That's why I still keep my guard up. The difference is that she hasn't just apologized. She spent months proving that she's changed. She's respected my boundaries, accepted my decisions, stopped trying to control my life, and made a genuine effort to understand why she was wrong. That's more accountability than most people are willing to show. As for Rachel, I eventually heard through mutual friends that she and Kyle broke up about 8 months later. Apparently, the excitement that comes with an affair isn't enough to build a real relationship. She reached out to me once with a long message about mistakes, regret, and wanting to talk. I deleted it without replying. There was nothing left to say. That chapter of my life is over, and I'm perfectly happy leaving it there. If there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. Rachel lost the privilege of being part of my life because of the choices she made. My mom earned a second chance because she accepted responsibility, respected my boundaries, and backed up her apology with consistent actions over time. Trust can be rebuilt, but only when someone is willing to do the work. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave the door open just enough for someone to prove they've changed. Knowing the difference is what matters most. Guys, we're getting really close to reaching 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you're enjoying these stories and haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate your support. Every subscription helps us get one step closer to that milestone. Thank you for being here and for helping make this dream a reality. Derek and I are brothers again. We're probably not as close as we could have been if he'd stood by me from the beginning, but we've found our way back to a good place. We grab dinner every now and then, text each other about sports, and things feel normal again. Sarah and I have also been talking about taking the next step and moving in together, but we're not rushing it. We've both been through enough to know there's no reason to hurry. We're making sure we're both completely ready before we do it. She's met all of my friends, I've met her family, and everything about our relationship feels steady and genuine in a way my marriage to Rachel never really did. About 7 months after the divorce, I saw Rachel one last time. She was having dinner with Kyle at a nice restaurant, but despite the expensive place, neither of them looked happy. She noticed me walking in with Sarah, and I watched her expression change from surprise to regret before she quickly tried to pretend she didn't care. I simply gave her a polite nod and kept walking. Whatever problems she was dealing with were no longer mine to solve. Every now and then I see people online saying I should have kept my mother out of my life forever. They think her apology in the hospital was nothing more than emotional manipulation and that eventually she'd fall back into the same old behavior. Maybe they're right. Maybe one day she'll disappoint me again. I honestly don't know. But I do know this. Holding on to anger and cutting someone out of your life forever can feel completely justified in the moment, but carrying that weight year after year is exhausting. It wasn't that I missed the arguments, the guilt trips, or the constant interference. I simply missed having a mother. Seeing her lying in that hospital bed made me realize that people are flawed, and sometimes it takes something life-changing before they truly understand the damage they've caused. Could she slip back into old habits? Absolutely. That's why I still keep my guard up. The difference is that she hasn't just apologized. She spent months proving that she's changed. She's respected my boundaries, accepted my decisions, stopped trying to control my life, and made a genuine effort to understand why she was wrong. That's more accountability than most people are willing to show. As for Rachel, I eventually heard through mutual friends that she and Kyle broke up about 8 months later. Apparently, the excitement that comes with an affair isn't enough to build a real relationship. She reached out to me once with a long message about mistakes, regret, and wanting to talk. I deleted it without replying. There was nothing left to say. That chapter of my life is over, and I'm perfectly happy leaving it there. If there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. Rachel lost the privilege of being part of my life because of the choices she made. My mom earned a second chance because she accepted responsibility, respected my boundaries, and backed up her apology with consistent actions over time. Trust can be rebuilt, but only when someone is willing to do the work. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave the door open just enough for someone to prove they've changed. Knowing the difference is what matters most. Guys, we're getting really close to reaching 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you're enjoying these stories and haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate your support. Every subscription helps us get one step closer to that milestone. Thank you for being here and for helping make this dream a reality.